Okay, hi. Good to see you again. Not that I can see you, but you can see me, and that's almost as good. Um, this is the video for reading number 8, the Carl Ginet reading on Justification. I realize that this reading is more than a little bit technical and very conceptually dense. Uh, so I'm going to do my best to elucidate at least the more complex aspects of it, just to try to sort of walk you through the highlights of it. Um, Hopefully, ideally, what I'd like to see is I'd like to see you read the paper, sort of highlighting the things that maybe you feel you need a little more instruction on, and then to watch the video and then uh, go back and read the paper again, having watched the video. So I'll wait. Kidding. You can just pause the video and go read the paper, and then or stop it entirely and then come back and and read it. So um, oh God, okay. Sorry, one of our cats was trying to eat a paper bag, so take paper filling from a package. So Morgan took it away. Because cats. All right. Um, anyway, um, all right. So let's dive into it. Um, Now, as a preface, let me sort of connect the talk about justification to the stuff that the last video was talking about what it means to know, the Williamson reading. In the last reading, we talked about knowledge, and Williamson laid out the sort of the basic requirements for knowing something, having propositional knowledge of something, which is, it seems like you have to have a belief, that is a mental state of giving credence to a proposition. So you have to have a belief, and that belief has to be true. Um, so that's the basic thing. But we also talked about how there are examples of situations where you can have a true belief and you clearly don't know. So what's going on is that we determine from that it's not enough to have a true belief. To okay, knowledge is more than mere true belief. That there has to be a a proper connection, a causal connection of the right kind between the actual fact of the matter, the truth, if you will, and the fact that you have that belief, that you give credence to that proposition. In other words, let's say it's an actual fact that it's going to rain tomorrow. It is an actual fact that it's going to rain tomorrow. And I believe that it's going to rain tomorrow. And the reason I believe it is because I asked my magic 8 ball and I shook it, and the magic 8 ball said it is definitely so. And now I believe it's going to rain tomorrow. Obviously, that's not a good reason to believe it's going to rain tomorrow. That would make me irrational to hold that reason, to hold that belief for that reason. Um, and it seems to be the case that I'm going to use the word reason a lot. I'm really sorry. I just want you to know I'm aware of it. Um, the reason that that is a bad reason. Holy shit, English is terrible. The reason that that is a terrible reason to believe that it's going to rain tomorrow is that there is no connection between the fact that it's going to rain tomorrow and the fact that my Magic 8 Ball said it was going to. My Magic 8 Ball saying that it's going to rain tomorrow, when I asked it, was pure coincidence. It would have given the same answer whether it was going to rain tomorrow or not. So there's a sort of a broken link between the reality of the situation and the thing that gave me confidence in my belief. My belief isn't properly hooked up to the reality of the situation. The On the other hand, if I check the weather app that has like all of the meteorology stuff and the radar tracking of cloud formations and following the barometric conditions and blah blah blah, all the stuff that tells you it's going to rain tomorrow, there is a fact of the matter that it is going to rain tomorrow, and that is directly connected to why the app says it's going to rain tomorrow. You see that? There's this direct connection from the fact that it will rain tomorrow, the reality of the situation, to the app that is basically reporting the reality of the situation. And then if I form my belief on the basis of this reliable indicator, I do have a good reason to have that belief, which makes me, the word that we use in epistemology is I have justification. It makes me justified in holding that belief. Justification is basically a word that we use to encompass all of the proper relationships between the facts on the ground, the actual situation, and the things that lead us to form a correct belief about the actual situation. Now, well, I'll get to that in a second. I was going to get to something else. But that's what we call justification. Okay. So, in other words, it seems like knowing something requires not only having a belief and that belief being true, but also that you have the right kinds of reasons for having that belief. Reasons that are properly and causally connected to the actual facts on the ground, the actual thing that you have a belief about. I believe it's going to rain tomorrow. I believe it's going to rain tomorrow because I checked a bunch of reliable indicators, and those reliable indicators only indicate what they do because of the facts on the ground. They are causally connected to the facts on the ground. They are truth tracking. I'll use that term more later in this semester, but that's a good one for you to know. The indicators are truth tracking, which means if the truth had been something else, like it's not going to rain tomorrow, then the indicators, the weather app, would have said that. If the truth is that there's going to be a hurricane, the weather app would have said that. Whatever the actual fact is, the indicators would reflect that because they are causally connected in the right way, and thus my forming my belief on the basis of those indicators, it has the right set of causal connections for me to have justification, for me to be justified in that belief. And therefore I have a justified, true belief. A JTB, a justified true belief. And that is at least one model of what it means to know, of knowledge. Now, is that the final word on knowledge? Have we solved epistemology? Is class over? No. That is not the final word on knowledge. there's two things that can be done from there. First of all, well, three things. First of all, it only explains, even if the JTB model explains everything we need to have explained and it explains it perfectly, even in that case, um, even in that case, it still only explains propositional knowledge, and we would still be able to talk about acquaintance knowledge and how-to knowledge. But some people say, uh, sorry, the other thing that needs to be done is that we need to flesh out what constitutes a justifying circumstance. I very broadly sketched it as the right kinds of causal connections, but that needs to be expanded upon. We need to figure out what we mean by the right kinds of causal connections, which causal connections are the right kind, and which aren't. So that's definitely the next step, and that's what we're going to spend a lot of the semester doing, is talking about which kinds of connections are the right kinds of connections to provide justification. And then we're going to talk at least a little bit about some people who don't think that the JCB model is sufficient. They seem to think that you can have justification and a true belief. You can have a belief that is true and justified and still fail to have knowledge. That would suck. That would just mess everything up. And maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, but we have to at least talk about it a little. So, okay. All right, so with all that in mind, we're going to dive into Carl Ginet's little explainer on justification, and he's going to try to basically go a little more in depth to talk about those causal connections and what's going on and how they're working and what kinds of causal connections we should regard as justifying. Okay. So this is the point in the class where if you were here, I would say, are there any questions? And you're not here, so I can't ask that. I mean, I can. I can say, are there any questions? No. Okay, Morgan says there aren't. And Morgan is your stand-in. And so if you have any problems and you do have questions, email Morgan. Morgan has just requested that you not email Morgan. Please don't email Morgan. My She-Ra sticker. Anyway. And the cats are playing in a paper bag just off screen. Anyway. And Morgan is desperately hoping not to receive random emails just off screen. Alright. Alright. So I'm giving you a moment to process. But let's get into it. Alright. So. Why am I looking? Okay. I clicked the wrong thing. Here we go. So. The first thing we want to talk about is credence and justification. So, as I said, having a belief is to have a proposition in your head that you give credence to, which means credence is just believing it's true. Justification explains why you, or it should explain why you have the credence. Think of it like in doing a science experiment. You form a hypothesis and think of the proposition without credence, that is the proposition that precedes belief. Think of that as your hypothesis, where you say, oh, I think I left my keys in the living room. That's not much of a scientific hypothesis. But just roll with me here. I think I left my keys in the living room. That's your hypothesis. And then you go into the living room and you see the keys. Dun, dun, dun. You see the keys there. And now you have belief that you left your keys in the living room. Why? Because you believe the proposition is true now. Now, maybe you believed it was true before, but you definitely believe it's true now. You give credence to the proposition. And what Ginet is saying is that the reason why you give credence to the proposition is because of the justificatory process, the process of acquiring justification. Now, in this case, what justifies your credence in the proposition, I left my keys in the living room? Well, what justifies your credence in that proposition, according to Ginet, is the causal factors of the that link the actual situation, which is your keys are in the living room, to the proposition. To your believing the proposition, to your giving the credence. You see it, right? Light waves bounce off of the keys. The light waves go into your face. They are processed by your brain, and you get an image of the keys. And since your sight is usually pretty reliable, you do not go around hallucinating car keys wherever you go. I'm assuming. I don't know what your personal struggles are, but I'm just going to go out on a limb and guess that you don't go around hallucinating car keys because of that. Because your sight is normally pretty reliable. You have a whole list, a whole set of circumstances that link from the actuality of the keys being there, to the light bouncing off, to the light going in your face, to the light being processed by the brain, to you getting an image of the keys in your brain, and that means suddenly you realize that you should believe the proposition, I left my keys in the living room. That's justification. In other words, your credence is explained by your justification. Now, that means your credence is not the same thing as justification. A thing cannot be explained by itself. So the fact that credence is explained by justification logically separates them. They have to be two different phenomena, because otherwise one could not explain the other. So I realize that's a nitpicky point, but I'm a philosopher. I'm allowed to be nitpicky. Morgan took the words right out of my mouth because I was drinking water. I am indeed required to be nitpicky. It's kind of my job. One time a student accused me of being pedantic in class. And I said, yeah. That's my job. That's why we're here. That gets funnier. If you don't know the word pedantic, 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 look it up and you'll see why it's hilarious that a student accused me of being pedantic in class while I'm teaching. I don't think that student knew what that word meant. Not really. Anyway. But yeah, I'm required to be picky. So, credence is explained by justification. Now, this is a point. I'm belaboring this point because of the next thing that comes up, which is the normative aspects of justification. Now, a norm is a guy from Cheers. No, sorry. That was a sitcom from before you were born. Ask your parents. Anyway, sorry. This is what it's like in class with me. So you should definitely take classes from me in person. Anyway, um, anyway. Um, norm. Right, norm. A norm is just, uh, the best way to put it, or the easiest way to put it, let's say, is a norm is a should. A norm is a supposed to. When you go into a fast food restaurant, I'm going to pick one totally at random, Taco Bell. When you go into a fast food restaurant, I'm obsessed with Taco Bell. I really like the new Cantina chicken burritos. They're really quite good. Anyway, they're not paying me for this. I just really like Taco Bell. Um, I wonder how this will affect the YouTube algorithm. Anyway, uh, right. When you go into a fast food restaurant, do you stand around waiting to be seated? Presumably, hopefully, you don't. Um, because you're not supposed to. In a fast food restaurant, you are supposed to go and order at the counter and then go seat yourself and wait for them to call you and then come up and get your food and then go sit back down. Nobody brings it to you. Except for that really weird time in the 80s at Burger King. Um, where they had table service and baskets of bread and stuff. It was weird. Um, not sure what they were going for there. But anyway, when you go into a fast food restaurant, you go up, you walk up to the counter, you order, you loiter there and get your food, and then go sit down, or you go sit down and wait, and then go get your food and come back and sit down. Either way, it's very different from how you act in a sit-down restaurant. In a sit-down restaurant, you go in, you check the little sign to see if you're supposed to seat yourself or not. If you aren't, you wait to be seated. A server will come to you and ask you for your drink order. You'll give them the drink order. You'll get your drinks first. They'll ask you for your food order. You'll give them your food order. They will later on bring your food. At no point do you have to stand at a counter and give an order. It's done very differently. Now, let me ask you, is that a law? No, it's not a law. Um, it's not a it's not a law. It's not like mind control or anything you do. It's just a custom. It's just the way things are done. And you have absorbed in the culture the way things are done, and that's how you do it. When you go into a fast food restaurant, you behave one way. When you go into a sit-down restaurant, you behave another way. You follow the customs. You follow the social norms. Those are the social norms, in other words. The expected behaviors, the shoulds, the supposed tos. Can you go into a fast food restaurant and sit down and wait to be served? Yeah. You're not gonna get served because everyone else is following a different set of social norms from you. You are behaving outside of the social norms for that place. And it's going to throw things off. There is a social norm about answering the telephone. You answer the telephone, and here in the US of A, we usually say hello or something like that. Um, we usually say something along those lines. That is the social norm. If we were in a different setting, there would be a different social norm. When I worked in an office as an office manager at one point, I was supposed to answer the telephone, hello, and the name of the company, and my name, and how may I help you? And it got so bad that sometimes I would answer the phone that way away from work. I think most people who have had to answer the telephone, Morgan is nodding, most people who have had to answer the telephone for work have done this in their personal life at some point. Um, that's funny. Morgan did it once when their boss was calling to ask, the boss from the work was calling their private number to ask them to come in, and Morgan answered the way they would at work. So that's funny. That's ironic. But that's a social norm, and norms are contextual. Just like social norms change from fast food restaurants to sit down restaurants, telephone answering norms change whether it's your personal telephone or whether it's the telephone at work, etc., etc., etc. There are all kinds of norms. Social norms are just one kind of norm. There are there are moral norms, like you shouldn't steal from people. Can you? Yes, but you shouldn't. And if you do, it means you're morally bad. That's different from social norms. Can you answer the telephone with a loud, extended scream? Yes, you can. Should you? No. It depends on the day. Depends on what kind of week you've had. But no, generally no. If you do violate that norm, you're not morally bad, but you're doing something that is socially, you're doing something socially weird, socially unusual, socially unexpected. That may throw people off. Just like if you walk into a fast food restaurant and sit down waiting to be served. You're not a bad person, but you have flouted the social norms in a way that may make it hard to interact in society. See? Social norm, interact in society. You can see where how that's connected. If you flout moral norms, you have then done something morally wrong, and you might be a bad person. There are practical norms. Should you put your cell phone in a tub of water? I mean, you can, but you shouldn't. Because if you do, then it won't work anymore. And if you want it to keep working, you shouldn't put it in a tub of water. I don't, that's super simple. If you don't want to get hit by a car, you should look both ways before crossing the street. These are practical norms. And if you flout practical norms, you're probably not going to get the desired results. Okay. All of that is to bring us back to, as I said, the normative aspects of justification. So, what Ginet is arguing is that justification, describing the justificatory circumstances for a belief, in other words, describing the reasons why why you give credence to the proposition, and why you are correct to give credence to the proposition, creates moral norms. Or not moral norms. Sorry, I said moral norms enough times, it got stuck in my head. Creates epistemic norms. Now remember, epistemology is the study of knowledge. And when we use the adjective epistemic, we are talking about things related to knowledge. So just like there are practical norms, there are things you should do in order to achieve your practical goals. There are moral norms. There are things you should and should not do in order to be a morally good person. And there are social norms. There are things you should and should not do in order to be able to interact in a positive and useful fashion with society. There are epistemic norms, which means there are things you should do and situations, things you should do in order to dispose you to having knowledge, and definitely circumstances under which you should give credence to a proposition, where you should have a belief rather than not hold that belief. If you see your keys on the table and you know that your vision is usually pretty reliable and that you are not currently under the influence of any hallucinogenic drugs and so on and so forth, and no one is trying to trick you by putting a paper replica of keys on the table, as long as you know certain basic things, if you see or think you see your keys on the table, you should believe that those are your keys and that you left your keys in the living room. Ta-da! An epistemic norm. There's a should there. There are epistemic norms. Let's think for a second about what circumstances would justify, to go back to my earlier example, what circumstances would justify a belief that it is going to rain tomorrow? Well, looking at a reliable weather app or something, or turning on the weather channel, or reading no one reads newspapers. Ask your parents. Anyway, I'm sure some of you have seen newspapers in person, maybe. When you were a child, perhaps. I mentioned reading newspapers in my earlier class today, and one person said, I saw people reading them when I was a kid. So I'm going to die any second. So savor this video as our last moments together. Anyway, just going to collapse, croak here. Where was I? Oh, right, a weather app. What justifies a belief? What justifies a belief that it's going to rain tomorrow? Well, consulting the kinds of sources that are causally connected to the facts on the ground that make it the case that it is going to rain tomorrow. Like, there are facts out there in the real world that are the reason that explain why it's going to rain tomorrow. And if you are consulting a source or relying on indicators that are connected to those facts in the right way, in a truth-tracking fashion, then you will have justification for a belief. But not only will you have justification, but because of, if you look at the explanation for why you have justification, creates a norm. Not only do you have justification, you should give credence. In other words, you're not only permitted to give credence to this proposition, to hold this belief, you ought to give credence to and hold this belief. Or give credence to this proposition and hold this belief. You are irrational if you are justified in the belief and then you don't hold it. If you look at all the reasons that explain, oh, this is the correct belief, and then you don't hold it, that's irrational. Okay. All right. I was going to say, are there any questions on that? I'm looking at Morgan.
I don't think so.
Morgan doesn't have any questions. Okay. I'm just going to assume from now on that Morgan will answer for all of you. So, okay. Again, any complaints? Morgan doesn't like this plan. Morgan has promised to make me not like this plan as well. That's how I choose to interpret that remark. Anyway, okay. All right, so let's look at the next bit. Interested and uninterested rationality. Okay. Well, okay, before I get into that, oops, no, stop that. Stop that! Oh, God, I clicked the wrong thing. I hope you can't see this. I don't think you can. Okay. All right, good. Um, Before I jump into interested and non-interested rationality, I do want to point something out. I think Ginet is wrong, or at least he is leaving out something important when he says that if you have justification, this creates a rational standard, a rational norm, that the justification means that you should hold this belief. It's possible, I think, and I think other authors will show us as we go on in this semester, it is possible to have justification for holding a belief, but still not be rationally required to hold the belief. That if you did believe it, you were justified in believing it, but that there is space for to not believe it, or at least to doubt it. You may not be rational in thinking it is irrational to hold the belief. You would be irrational if you ignored the existence of the justification, or but you could probably be rational if you suspended your belief on some of these things. Not in every case, but in some special cases. There may be some wiggle room there. But for now, we are going to proceed with the sort of basic picture that Ginet has given us, that the justification, the existence of a justificatory structure, let's say, the existence of a structure of justification, a story about justification for this credence, creates a rational standard. That means you should hold the belief. Okay. Now, interested and disinterested rationality. One thing that Ginet wants to point out, he's at pains to point out, is that the standard that we should be applying to these justification stories, these justificatory structures, is that of disinterested rationality. Which means that we should sort of imagine a completely neutral third-party observer, and would that person think that the circumstances for giving credence to the proposition, the circumstances for holding the belief, do they are they reasonable? Do they create that rational standard which says you should hold this belief, no matter who you are, or within tolerances? Are all similarly situated people. That is different from interested rationality, which Ginet warns that we have to be careful of. Because there are norms that can apply to our belief formation that are not epistemic norms. Let me explain. Suppose that I work in retail. And I am desperately trying to hold on to my sanity, which is endangered by working in retail. The last shreds of my ability to cope with reality are at stake here. I have evidence, ample evidence, that my boss is a sociopath who doesn't care about workers. Epistemically, I am justified in believing that my boss is a sociopath who doesn't care about workers. But it might be that on a practical level, if I allow myself to believe that, I'm just going to lose all hope. I'm just going to go nuts. I'm not going to be able to function. Right? I just can't. I can't go on that way. That is what Ginet would call an interesting reason, a kind of interesting rationality. That I do have reasons to believe. I have reasons to hold the belief that my boss is a relatively normal human who isn't out to get me. But those reasons are non-epistemic reasons. I have reasons to believe this that do not bear upon the actual truth or falsehood of the proposition. Maybe I have. There might be social reasons to believe certain things or to hold certain beliefs, to give credence to them. Maybe it would be really hard to interact in society if you held the belief that everybody in society was a bastard-flavored bastard with a crunchy bastard coating. If you believed that everyone in society was a horrible person, it might be really difficult to interact with other people on a day-to-day basis. And Ginet would say that, not that he's saying that everyone is horrible, but I don't know why the theme of these examples is horrible people, but it really is. But yeah, not that Ginet would say that everybody is horrible, but maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But he would say that as a social, you have a reason to believe that people are basically decent that has nothing to do with the truth or falsehood of that proposition. It has everything to do with social reasons, the ability to continue interacting with society. So that's an interesting rationality. Maybe I have personal reasons to believe that my friend isn't lying to me. Those reasons may clash with the truth of the situation, the epistemic reasons for believing one or the other, but I may have personal, emotional reasons to believe that. I can't emotionally bring myself to give credence to the proposition that my friend is lying to me. Those are all what Ginet would call interesting reasons. And they apply because of specific, peculiar personal circumstances that apply to a particular person being talked about. When you pick out a particular individual, you can identify their interesting reasons, their personal reasons. They have a personal interest in believing this or that or the other. And what Ginet wants us to focus on are the disinterested reasons, the disinterested rationality. His claim is that once you have a good justificatory structure, a good justification story for a belief, if it is a good justification story, that relates the causal connections between the actual facts on the ground and giving credence to the proposition. And the reason why you're giving credence to the proposition, if it is a truly good explanation of the relationships there, then it will automatically be based on disinterested reasons. Because for something to be proper, to give proper epistemic reasons to believe something, that is, to give justification for a belief, proper epistemic justification for a belief, in order for that to be true, the reasons that it relies upon must be disinterested reasons that will apply equally to any similarly situated person relevant to the kind of belief we're talking about. Okay. I'll ask Morgan if they have any questions. Makes sense. Uh, Presumably Morgan isn't just saying everything makes sense, so I'll be done with this. Okay. All right, good. Um, let's see here. What was the next thing? Oh, yeah. The caveat I gave there. The caveat I gave there about reasons. Um, for similarly situated people. Um, a justificatory structure, an explanation of how the facts on the ground causally relate to the belief formation process is going to depend on context. For instance, imagine, I don't know how many of you take calculus. I took calculus a very long time ago. I took calculus something like 32 years ago. Yeah, 30. God. In, out. My therapist taught me that. Anyway, no, Morgan taught me that. But my therapist approves. Sounds better to say my therapist taught me. Um, um, Morgan's kind of my therapist. Um, Morgan's not my therapist. No, anyway. Oversharing. Something you can always count on in my classes. Where was I? Oh, right. 32 years ago. 32 years ago! No, I took calculus 32 years ago, and I don't remember any of it. That was a long run or a short slide there. I don't remember any of it. So if you show me a calculus formula and then say, looking at this formula, do you believe the answer is 3? I would have no grounds for believing or not believing that. It means nothing to me. Um, I would have no way to form a rational opinion about whether that is the answer or whether that is not the answer. I should neither give credence nor withhold credence from that belief. I should just be like, oh. Um, but if you are a calculus understanding person and you look at that formula, presumably you will be able to form an accurate assessment. And let's assume the answer is 3. So you will have access to everything you need to be justified in forming the belief the answer to this equation is 3. So there is a justification story to tell from the facts on the ground, which in this case are, this is the formula, that connects to the belief the answer is 3. There's an explanatory story that connects those, but that story involves knowing calculus. And since I don't have access to that justificatory structure. I can't have that justification for the belief. Now, I can have a different justification. If a reliable calculus person told me the belief was 3, or the answer was 3, then I have consulted a reliable source that has access to their own grounds of justification, and now I have sort of a second-hand justification that the answer is 3, just like consulting the weather app. I'm not looking at the raw data. I'm not a freaking meteorologist. I'm not doing my own analysis of weather patterns. I'm looking at the app, and other people who have done the analysis of the weather patterns are providing information to the app that tell me it's going to rain tomorrow. And so when I look at the app, I get justification because the app is reliable, because the people are reliable. So, yes, the justifying story, the set of justifying connections between the facts on the ground and the belief need to be disinterested, which means they need to be properly epistemic reasons that are potentially accessible in a general sense. But they don't need to be practically accessible to everyone. It can actually be the case that only some people have access to those things. Not because of their, not because of specifically personal reasons, though, in Ginet's account. All right, hopefully that was understandable. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. Okay, so the next thing is claiming to know. Claiming to know. So Ginet says that, in a way, saying I know, blah blah blah, like I know that the Taco Bell on 11th is open 24 hours. Yeah, that's going to keep being an example for me. What? Back to that. I know it's bad for me, and I know it is not in any way, shape, or form actual Tex-Mex food. I still like it. I'm allowed to destroy my body in any way I please. And I want to destroy it with a Cantina chicken burrito and a hard-shell taco supreme. And Baja Blast. So that is the handbasket in which I have elected to go to hell. We are all allowed to choose and decorate our own handbasket. Anyway. But yeah, if I say I know, claiming to know something, if I know that the Taco Bell on 11th is open 24 hours, claiming to know something is, in a way, similar to promising. When you make a promise, you are creating a norm out of thin air. Promises are weird on a moral and practical level. On a normative level, they're very strange. Because, well, okay, let's say, just out of thin air, should I send everyone in the class pictures of our cats? Right now, no. I have no normative, no norm obligates me to do that. It wouldn't necessarily be bad if I did it. I wouldn't be breaking any norms if I sent pictures of our cats to the class. I wouldn't be violating any norms, but I also wouldn't be violating any norms if I didn't do that. There's been no discussion of doing that. And certainly it's not a part of any practical or social or professional norm that is accepted already. But if I say, I promise I will send everyone in the class pictures of our cats, if I make a promise, then suddenly I have created a norm. By promising, I have pulled out of thin air a should. and applying it to myself. I have promised, therefore I should. If I promise to come over and help you move, then I should do it. Now, whether I should have promised or not, that's a different story. Maybe I had good practical reasons that I shouldn't have made that promise. But once I've made it, I have created a norm, at the very least a social norm, and maybe, depending on the kind of promise, a moral norm. But at the very least, I've created a social norm that I should now, by definition, since it's a norm, that I should fulfill, that I should honor. Promises are weird. Promises basically create norms. And what Ginet is claiming is that saying saying I promise blah 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 is to whip up a norm out of thin air. And what Ginet is saying is that to say I know blah 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 is similar to that. You're not whipping up epistemic norms out of thin air, but what you are doing is you are asserting epistemic norms. To say I know that the Taco Bell on 11th is open 24 hours is to explain that I have access to justifications, and that if you understood those justifications, if you had access to them, you too would know it. It'll happen to you! Sorry, I got Grandpa Simpson for a second there. I am basically saying if I am basically telling you that there is a justificatory structure that, given certain caveats, if you had access to it also, you would know the same thing I knew. And you would be normatively obligated. You would be obligated by epistemic norms to hold the same belief that I hold. If a calculus person tells me, if they look at the formula and they say, well, I know the answer is 3, then they are basically saying, I know the answer is 3 based on the justificatory structure, that is to say, based on the rules of calculus and blah, blah, blah. I am obligated to believe that the answer is 3. If I don't believe the answer is 3, I'm being irrational. And furthermore, if you knew calculus, if you had access to the same grounds of justification that I have access to, you would also be obligated to believe the answer was 3. If you had all the stuff that I have in my head in your head, you would be obligated on pain of irrationality to believe the same thing I believe. So that is why Ginet is suggesting that there is this normative character, to justification. And what he's saying is that when we claim to know, I am assuring someone about my mental state. So it establishes rational norms and it tells them what's in my head. I am telling people that I have a belief, I have a proposition in my head, I give credence to that proposition, that is, I think that it's true, and by distinguishing my belief as knowledge rather than just belief, I have access to the grounds of justification. I have the grounds of my credence, which is justification, the justification for the belief. I have access to the justification for the belief. So, claiming to know sets up a rational standard, and it tells you about what's in my head. And what's in my head is a proposition that I think is true, and a bunch of reasons why I think it's true, that I have assessed as good, as requiring me to believe that this proposition is true, in fact. Those reasons being justification for the belief. Okay. We're almost done, I promise. Thank you for holding on. Make sense?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Alright, so when am I justifying? Hey, that's the magic question, right? Like I said, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this for the rest of the semester. And Ginet's story about when you have justification is going to be pretty controversial. We're starting with this one, but we're going to look at some big alternatives. Because so far we've talked about how justification works, but we haven't talked about, okay, we know what justification does. We know, like, the nature of it. We're now trying to figure out which things count as justification. Okay. So the first thing that Ginet suggests on page 84, obviously there are 84 pages in your reading, but they're numbered at the bottom from the thing I copied this out of. And the one that says 84, page 84, Ginet thinks that the conditions of the justification must be completely available. What he means by this is not immediately clear, but there's two basic things we can sort of pull out of it. The first thing he means is that the conditions of the justification must be formally available, which is to say it must be possible to explain the full story between the actual facts that exist out in the world and and how they cause one, or how they are connected causally to giving credence to the belief. And that may be a very complicated story. When we look at the actual fact on the ground out in the world with the calculus formula is the formula. This is the formula. And when we explain how the formula, like what's the story connecting the formula to giving credence to your belief in the answer, that the answer is 3, we would tell a very complicated story about the rules of mathematics and how they apply and which rules are involved with evaluating this formula, and a story about how you came to know those rules and how you are correct in your understanding of those rules and how we know that, which has to do with having proven that you're correct in your understanding of the rules through assessments and practical experience and blah, blah, blah. It would be a lengthy and complicated story, but the story is available to tell. Now, why is he insisting that the conditions of the justification must be available? Why is he insisting that? Because what it does is it heads off at the pass any kind of black box explanation. And I say explanation in the most sort of, an explanation. It heads off any sort of black box explanation of what's going on. And by black box, what I mean is any point in the story where we just have to shrug and say, oh. So imagine that you had a little magic 8-ball kind of device that predicted the weather. Or let's say it is a magic 8-ball, but if you ask it a question about the weather, like will it rain tomorrow, the magic 8-ball that you own, not every magic 8-ball, just the one you got, it always answers correctly. So here is the facts. The facts on the ground are, you've asked your magic 8 ball, will it rain tomorrow? And the magic 8 ball said yes. You give credence to that belief. Is there a story we can tell about why you give credence to the belief and the grounds for believing that? According to Ginet, a crucial part of that story, in other words, the part that explains why the magic 8 ball gives correct answers, a crucial part of that story is not available. We don't know why it gives answers. It's magic, and therefore you are not justified. Even though it is the correct answer, this is definitely the correct answer, you have a belief that is going to be proven correct. It is a true belief, but it lacks justification because the story just isn't there. If we don't have available to us the ability to explain the whole causal story, or how we get from the facts on the ground to credence in the proposition, then it can't count as justification. Does that make sense?
I think yes.
Okay. That's one thing he's saying. Okay. The next thing he's saying is that you are justified. So you're justified when there is a story available. Now, let me go back. What does that mean for us practically? You might be wondering why I should give a shit about that condition absent genuinely magical magic 8 balls. Here's why. Because it establishes that being justified is at least partially dependent on the state of your society. It's not something that happens just in your head. There are social aspects to justification. Let me give an example. Imagine that somehow I traveled back in time and I met a medieval peasant, and somehow we could talk to each other. Maybe I brushed up on my old English or something, whatever. Don't worry about that part for now. And I said to the medieval peasant, you must believe this. You must believe this, but illness is caused by tiny invisible creatures called bacteria. That infections are caused by tiny invisible creatures called bacteria that live all over the surface of everything and get into open wounds and cause them to become infected. And then I vanish and I go back to the future. The medieval peasant does believe me because I have a very trustworthy face. I say it very charmingly. And the medieval peasant does believe me. And obviously what I've told them is true. But they would still not be justified according to this condition. Not only because they have no way of establishing my credentials. This would be like if some random person looked at the calculus formula and said, oh, the answer is 3. And then they were gone before I could ask them, well, wait a minute, do you know calculus? Right. Like if I knew nothing about this person, I probably wouldn't be justified in believing the answer is 3 because I don't have any way to verify their credentials and that they actually know what the hell they're talking about. It's like asking the internet for advice. Bad idea. I spend a lot of time on Reddit, don't get me wrong, but I am making fun of most of the people I meet there. Now, I'm kidding. I'm just there for the memes. Anyway, But no, seriously. The medieval peasant would not be justified in believing this true thing for a couple of reasons. First of all, they have no way of establishing my credentials. But second, they have, they don't even have, their society doesn't even have the right kinds of concepts to support a belief in bacteria. They have no context to put it in. If a medieval scientist, a medieval doctor woke up in the middle of the night with a stroke of genius and was like, oh, you know what, infection is caused by little invisible creatures that live all over everything and get into open wounds and cause them to become infected, that is correct, and the person still wouldn't be justified. They cannot tell a story about how we get from the facts on the ground, which involve actual bacteria, to the belief. They have nothing to link them except for I thought about it, I came up with it in a dream, which is not a good justificatory story. Justification is not something that you can do entirely on your own. Justification depends on your social context and your social background. It's not a personal achievement. It depends a great deal on what is, in other words, what is knowable by a person depends a lot on their social background, the kinds of other things that are known in society, and so on and so forth. There are probably true things about the world that not only do we not know right now, that we could not know. That we don't have we just don't have the context for knowing them. Imagine a scientist who's running an experiment gathers some anomalous data, and the data is consistent. These data anomalies are consistent under certain circumstances, but they don't make any sense given everything we understand about science. Are other scientists reasonable if they ignore this new data, or at least don't believe any particular explanation for it yet? Yeah, they are. It's completely reasonable to push that stuff to the side and say, I don't know what to think about that, until we have developed a better sense of the justificatory story of how the new theories that might explain the data are connected to the actual data that we've observed. We are only justifying in these new beliefs once we've drawn that connection properly. We can propose wild theories, but they remain propositions. They remain hypotheses until we can establish some genuine causal story that explains how this all fits together. Okay. So that's the first condition for when I'm justified. The conditions of the justification must be available. Now, must I know all of them? So I'm skipping ahead to the third bullet point here because I put these in the wrong order and I only just now realized that. Must I be able to articulate all of the conditions of justification? Ginet says no. Which sounds weird, but let me explain why. The example he uses is a little kid who can recognize a square when he sees it. He knows how to spot a square. He knows how to tell a square from a rectangle. He knows how to tell a square from a circle and from a triangle. He knows his shapes. This is a great kid. He's super smart. He knows his shapes. He is killing it in kindergarten. He's going places. Um, he is the valedictorian of his preschool. Um, Genet would argue, and he does argue, sorry, Genet does argue, that this kid does not have complete access to the full story of why that is a square rather than something else, of why you should believe that is a square rather than something else. Because the full story, he says, has to do with four 90-degree angles and equal length sides, and the kid doesn't know that. The kid doesn't even know those terms. The kid doesn't know what 90 degrees means. He doesn't know what equilateral sides means. He doesn't know any of that. He has used his pattern recognition ability, which humans are super good at. He has developed that, and he has used that to be able to identify squares reliably. And he knows that's a square. Genet would say he genuinely knows that's a square, even though he doesn't have access to the full story about why you should believe it's a square. He has access to only a tiny portion of the story. Like, it looks the same as, or at least the same, because it's not necessarily the same size or color as other squares he's seen, but it looks the same in certain ways that he can't articulate. He has access to only a little bit of the story about why he should believe that's a square rather than something else. And Genet says that's fine. You don't have to have full access to this. How do we feel about that? I don't know. It's tough. On the one hand, Genet says that the full story should be technically available, which is okay. I don't need... There is a complete story about why you should believe the answer to that calculus formula is 3. I could not articulate all of it. Even if I understood calculus, I probably couldn't on a practical level. But since I don't understand calculus, I definitely can't. And yet, if a person that I knew to be a reliable source told me the answer, I would then believe the answer is 3. I would be justified in thinking the answer is 3. And therefore, I would know the answer was 3. I would know the answer, because someone who knows the answer told me, and now I know it. But I can only tell a small portion of the story about why I'm justified in thinking the answer is 3. I have to say, well, someone who knows the answer is 3 told me, and ask her how they know a bunch of stuff that I can't really articulate all of it. So that's what Genet is suggesting. He says the full story must be available in the technical sense. That we can't have any point in the story where we just shrug our shoulders about the causal relations, where we would be forced to shrug our shoulders about the causal relations. We can't do that, but we would have to. We don't have to have personal access to the whole story as long as we have enough of it. What constitutes enough of it? That's a problem. Genet doesn't really get into adequate detail about that, which is annoying. Other authors that we're going to read are going to tackle that a little bit, but I don't know. So this is at least his suggestion, and we'll kind of go on from there. But his suggestion is you need to be able to tell a crucial part of the story, but not the whole story. But the whole story must be tellable. even if even if no one around can tell the story in a practical sense, it must be tellable. Okay. So when am I justified? When I when I have access to enough reasons to sort of explain why I hold this belief, and when there are a sufficiency of reasons available. When there's a complete story available and I have enough of it, that's when I'm justified. Okay. And one last condition: when am I justified? When there are no defeating conditions. Okay. This is the last thing. I'll let you go. I know we're running up against the time here. Not that we're in a classroom, but I like to keep these to no longer than an actual class period if possible. Just because I don't want to get into a habit of like giving my face to face classroom a 1 hour and 20-minute lecture on something and then giving you like 6 hours. That would be weird. And also, you would hate me. And Morgan would get tons of complaints. Uh, uh,
Stay out of it.
anyway. Um, ain't I a skinker? Anyway, by the way, I had never seen any Looney Tunes cartoons until Morgan made me watch them not very long ago. I didn't watch them growing up. Bugs Bunny and all that. Ain't I a skinker? I'd never seen any of that. Um, I remember when Space Jam came out in the 90s, and people were super excited about it. And I did not watch basketball, nor had I ever seen any Looney Tunes cartoons. So I didn't get it at all. I had no base, and when it came out on video, videos used to be things that we put in machines called VCRs. Hey, you laugh. I asked my class earlier today how many of them had ever seen a VCR machine in person. Only about half of them said they had. I have been told to shut up. Anyway, when Space Jam came out on VCR, on VHS, I my roommates watched it, and I watched it with them, and it just completely made no impact on me because I had no connection to basketball, and I had no frame of reference for any of these animated characters that I had seen. So, anyway, where was I? Oh, no defeating conditions. Right. So, what Ginet is allowing for here is the possibility that I have a justificatory story available to me. I have justifiers available to me, but I also have some kind of situation that makes me, that prevents me from being justified. And it has to be an epistemic defeater. It can't be. He's not talking about an interested reason. Like, if I have all the evidence I need to believe that my best friend stole from me, but I just don't want to believe it emotionally, he's not talking about that. What he's talking about is this. Like, for instance, hypothetically, um, if you go into the living room and you see your keys on the table, you have, and let's say they really are there. This is crucial to the story. Your keys really are on the table, and you see your keys on the table. Now you have a complete story about that would justify a belief that your keys are on the table. But you are under the influence of a powerful drug that can cause hallucinations. Let's say you had your wisdom teeth out earlier and you're still recovering and you're still very loopy from the medicine and you're not in your right mind and you know it is possible you are imagining things. let's assume the Genghis uses some really funky drugs for that, non-standard stuff. So it is possible that you're imagining your keys. Now, you aren't. As a matter of fact, you are not imagining your keys. You are seeing your keys. You are seeing them accurately. The physics is really there. The light is bouncing off the keys. The light is going in your face, into your eyes, being processed by your brain. You get an image of the keys. You have everything you need to be justified in believing that the keys are there. Because you have everything that in the previous example, the person who wasn't on drugs, you have the same situation they were in as far as reasons to believe the keys are there. In theory, you should be just as justified as they are. But the fact of the matter is, you also have something else going on that gives you pause, that gives you a reason to doubt what you're seeing. So that even when you are seeing things accurately, you cannot trust that you are seeing them accurately. In other words, if justification is what explains the credence, remember, we're going back to that. Something I mentioned earlier is coming up again. That's how school works. It's all connected. Future lessons will reference previous ones. I bet you didn't know that. No. If justification is what explains the credence, then while it looks like on the surface you have the same justification, and therefore you should have, remember, rational standards, you should have the same credence, which is a lot, you should believe it. In this case, there's been an additional element to the story that changes the standard of what credence level you should have. You should not give as much credence to your belief, even though it happens to be correct in this case. The physical facts are all the same about the keys and the light and how vision operates and all that. Everything is the same there, but the addition of the fact that you are on powerful drugs that can cause hallucinations should lower your credence. That is what we call a defeater. The addition of another factor that defeats the justificatory story, that causes you to be in a position where you ought to not give as much credence, or you ought to lower your credence in this proposition. That is what we call a defeater. So when are you justified? You are justified when you have access to at least a partial justificatory story, one that is complete enough for the circumstances. When there is a more full justificatory story available that doesn't have any gaps in it. And when there are no defeaters present that would screw up your credence assignment in this case. That's when you're justified. Questions, concerns, fears, haiku, declarations of war, license renewals. Okay, Morgan says it sounds good to them. So, I'm going to assume it sounds good to you. I realize the Ginet reading is, again, very conceptually dense and very technical. Please actually read it. Don't get a paragraph into it and say, I'm done. That's too much. That is not how you get better. School is like this is college. This is the gym. This is the gym for your brain. And the Ginet reading is that one workout weight machine that you hate. The one that you don't like using. Because it's not fun. And it makes you sore. But if you use it enough, you will get stronger. The Ginet rigging is that. If you wrestle with this hard enough, you will get smarter. You will advance your understanding. You will exercise your brain. And you will get used to thinking in ways that you aren't used to thinking in. And the next time you have to do a complicated reading in this class or another one, you will be more capable of handling it. So please do the reading. If you haven't done the reading yet, feel free to watch this video a couple of times and then do it. Or to watch the video and do the reading and pause the video and then read the next bit and then unpause the video and maybe rewind it, whatever. Do what you have to do. Take notes while you read it. That's good too. Take notes while you watch the video. I prefer you again. This is what substitutes for your lectures. Uh, I think that's everything. So, good luck with the reading. The next video, I'm going to try and get some more videos done tomorrow, which is Friday, and get those uploaded. And that way, you will have everything you need. Again, if people in a future class are watching this, ignore that part. All the videos will have been uploaded for you. Haha. Don't forget to do your reading responses. Um, if you were in a future class of mine, you probably still have reading responses, and if you don't, please ignore that part also. Alright, take care, have a good day, be well, bye.